Right, hello and welcome back to another video. This week we'll be carrying on directly from the direct communication that we were looking at last week, and we're going to have a look at event dispatchers. So I'll just quickly save all these. So we need to create a blueprint that will do an event dispatcher. So going to here, I'm going to create a new actor blueprint, event dispatcher. So the way this works is down here, if I just turn off the show inherited, we have event dispatchers. We can add this to this blueprint. So event dispatcher, and we'll say, I don't know, test event. That can be a good enough name for now. So this is now kind of like a global fire and forget message. So if we go into our event graph, I'm going to do a very similar kind of debug setup, do a quick delay for 1 second, and then I'm going to take my event dispatcher. If I bring this in, I'm going to do a call. And what this is going to do is going to call that event dispatcher. So it's going to sort of trigger this event off. Currently that's not going to do anything because we haven't assigned anything to sort of respond to this event dispatcher. And so we can do that. So here are our blueprints. Yeah, like I say, trigger, wait for a second, and then fire off this this event. And there's a few ways we can use this. One is via the level blueprint. So if we open up the level blueprint, if we have our kind of event dispatcher actor selected, if we right click here, we can add an event, and it's going to be in default because we didn't give it a category. But here it is, add event dispatcher test event. So you can kind of have multiple blueprints or sort of multiple setups that all trigger off these events, and then here we can set up whatever logic we want in our level blueprint. So if I just take one of these, let's do it as a new version of that. So actually let's duplicate our initial target light, and I'm going to call this BP event disp target light, just so it doesn't get affected by the blueprints we made last week. And all this is the same, it's just the toggle visibility and toggle visibility function on a basic light, so nothing particularly complex there. With this selected, we can go in here, create a reference, and then do our toggle light. And so we're using the sort of level blueprint, trigger off our event, and there we are, our light's turning off. Where this is useful is you can have lots of different blueprints here. At the moment we've just got one, it's called event dispatcher, but we can have lots of different ways of triggering off the same thing. And so rather than having, I don't know, let's say you're making a stealth action puzzle game, sort of Deus Ex-y type thing, you might have sort of a second part of the level that needs to be set up. And you can either trigger that off by killing a certain character or unlocking a certain door, or just like sneaking through an event and going through a trigger volume, and they all set up the second part. So they could all use the same events, and then there'd be lots of other blueprints, characters, spawners, lots of, I don't know, materials, anything like that, flashing lights. Let's say you set up an alarm. They could all have lots of things listening for one event and lots of things spawning the same event, which is a nice way to work for that kind of sort of overarching feel. If you did that via direct communication, you'd have to have a lot of direct lines of communication all open all the time, and it would get quite messy. So it's quite a nice way of keeping your kind of gameplay code nice and clean. Now there's a couple other ways we can use event dispatchers, so let's try that. In this case we had a target light here, and let's just duplicate this and do event dispatcher direct ref. And so this is kind of a hybrid between the two solutions. So here this light, again functionality wise, is just a light, so we can toggle it on and off. But what we can do is we can take a reference to our event dispatcher. I haven't spelled that right, but it's probably fine. BP event dispatcher, and that was the sort of the actor that's causing the event to go off. And with that reference, again, if I have to compile, I'll have to set that manually. So this is the direct referencing. Oops, it needs to be exposed. the direct referencing we looked at last week. Here we are. Now this is referencing the event dispatcher, and with that we can take the event from here and bind it. So let's say we want to do a event begin play, and then we can do a reference to this event dispatcher, and we can do a bind to event dispatcher test event. So here's a reference to a blueprint that has the test event in it, and we need that. That's the kind of the event that we're calling, and we can use this bind. And what will happen now is whenever this test event is called, it will also trigger off this custom toggle light event that's happening down here. Here, this is a difference. We can't do that with a function, but we could make a custom event that calls the function. So I mean, it would be fine. So what will happen here now? Well, this is our event dispatcher direct reference. If I bring a copy of this in, I've got that there. So now when the event fires off here, this light will be turned off via the level blueprint, and this light will be turned off because those two events have been bound together. And if we test that, that's exactly what happens. Now, this seems a little bit long-winded, potentially, to go through all this. If we're going to have that direct reference, do we really need to then use the event dispatcher? Well, this idea of binding, there's actually some quite nice things we can do where we're spawning actors. So I'm just going to set up a quick actor blueprint. I'm going to say cube spawner, and I'm going to create another quick actor blueprint, which is going to be a fizz cube. Ooh. Just turn off that fizz cube. Here we are. So this is my physics cube actor. So I'm just going to add a quick cube component. I'm going to make that the root, activate physics over here, and I'm going to add a self-destruct as well. So begin play, delay, and let's give it, I don't know, 2 seconds. And after that, I'm going to do a destroy self. Destroy actor. So after 2 seconds, this is just going to destroy itself. Yeah, let's try this. If we just test that, if I wait, it's going to fall, and then it's going to destroy itself. That's cool. Now I don't want to spawn these, well, I don't want to have this directly in the world. I'm going to spawn those via my other blueprint, this thing, cube spawner. And what this is going to do is on tick, so every frame, I'm going to do a gate. And what this is going to do is it's going to go through and spawn actor from class. So I'm just going to tell it to create one of those physics cubes. And then what I want is I want a couple of events over here, 2 custom events. And this is going to be open gate. And then I'm going to create another one, which I'm going to call close gate. Close gate. And I'm going to hook those up to the right areas, or the right things. So I'm going to start open. So the first frame, we're going to go through the gate, spawn a cube, and then I'm actually going to call that close gate function. And that's going to just spawn one of them. And what I want is every time this actor dies, I want it to reopen, so that my cube's going to kind of like, as it dies, a new one spawns. So this might be something you find in a puzzle game. If you think about Portal, you have the companion cubes. As they get destroyed, obviously the player needs one, so it respawns a new one. And we can do that automatically using events here. So let's just test this first. What's not happening? Oh, I don't have a transform. Get actor transform. So I'm just going to spawn this cube where this blueprint is, and that should now work. So we'll just test that. If I quit the game, yeah, my physics cube spawns, but as it dies, it doesn't re-trigger off a new one. So I need to, well, so I need a event in here, because I need an event to bind to. So if I go back into my physics cube over here, if I create an event dispatcher in here, and I'm going to call this has died. If I go in and just make sure I'm getting this right, I can do a here bind to, oops, bind to has died. So now this cube has an event inside it, that event dispatcher. This is what we've created here. We can't put anything inside that, but we can call that event just before we destroy the actor. So now the spawned actor, the spawned physics cube, has inside it a way of telling the parent or telling the spawner that it's died. So there's that kind of communication again. So in this case, bind the event, and that event is going to be to open the gate. So if we look at the logic, every frame we're trying to go through this gate. If you've not encountered a gate node before, it either passes the execution pin through or it doesn't, depending on if it's open or closed. Hopefully not too difficult to understand. If the gate's open, we're going to spawn the actor, bind this event, and then close the gate to stop any more spawning. And then in here, after a certain number of seconds, it's going to die, destroy itself, and also trigger off that event. Well, that event's now been bound to here, so that event is also this event, and that's going to open the gate again. So what we should see is a sort of a continuous stream of physics cubes that, as they die, spawn off a new one, which is quite cool. Quite a nice way of using event dispatchers. Cool. That's it for event dispatchers. I'm just going to run on to interface. We've only had 10 minutes, quick video so far, so let's split this into two. Now, finally, blueprint interfaces. What are these? Well, these are actually a separate type of actor, so if we, or separate type of entity, I should say. So if I go to blueprints, we can do a blueprint interface. Now, I'm going to give it this suffix of BPI for blueprint interface, but it depends on what your naming convention is. And I'm going to call this take damage. Now, if we open up the blueprint interface, we have a function here. We can't add any nodes here. We don't add any functionality to our blueprint interface. We just add inputs and outputs. So here, I'm going to call this take damage. Very common sort of use case of blueprint interfaces. And on taking damage, we need some inputs and outputs. So one thing we might want to know if we're triggering a take damage command or take damage function is how much. So damage amount, and then we might also have an output, and I'm going to have one here saying kill actor, kill target, and the question mark. So now the way this works, we've created a kind of like high-level template for this function. And we can now implement this in multiple different blueprints, and the logic of what the take damage function will do is unique to that blueprint, but this kind of interface is sort of the global setup, and that can be useful for a number of reasons. So let's just close these down. That was all the event dispatcher stuff. So now I have my blueprint interface. I'm going to make two different targets. One is going to be a, let's say, BP interface light. And here, the way this works, if we go to our class settings, we can actually add interfaces. There's a number already existing in here. I've got two called blueprint take damage. That's because I've set this up before. Blueprints communication, I think it's this one. It should probably be pretty similar. But now you can see we've got this interface here, take damage. And you can see here now we can add code into this. So in this case, this is our light. Fine. Well, if I take damage, let's do a quick check. Is the damage we've taken greater than, let's say, 10? Obviously, your numbers will vary depending on what you're doing. Oh, I need to add my point light. That's what this thing is. So I have a point light here. On take damage, if the damage is greater than 10, let's do a branch. So check it here. If the damage was greater than 10, yes. And I'm just going to toggle the visibility. Well, not toggle the visibility. Let's just do set visibility and turn the light off. So the visibility will now be false. In this case, we have killed the target. So I'm going to click that as a yes. And we probably want a second return node. So on false. Oh. So we're going to return back this information either way. Take damage has it been killed, yes or no. So was the damage greater than a certain health? And we can build whatever logic we want in here to deal with our health. And there we are. This will be a blueprint interface light. And then I'm going to do another blueprint. I'm going to do another different type of actor, BP interface cube. Now, same process in class defaults. I'm going to add my BPI take damage. I should probably rename one of those. Let me just do that. Let's call this one deal damage, just so I make sure that I'm using the right thing. So here in the interface cube, I have take damage, and this one has take damage. So I've used the other one, but that doesn't matter. And this one says deal damage. Oh, that's because that's the function name. Let's make sure my naming is correct. So deal damage, I want the function to be called deal damage. There we are. Now hopefully I can see that I've used the right one. So in this cube, yeah, deal damage, right. Now for the cube, I don't care how much damage it takes. All I want to do is half it in size. So I'm going to just get a cube. I'm going to get the scale. And then just set the scale. Set world scale to be that multiplied by 0.5. So on receiving damage through this interface, it's not going to do any logic, it's just going to half in size. And it doesn't matter in this case whether we've killed it or not. That's the logic I'm going to use for this. Now, where is this useful, or why is this useful? Well, if I make one last blueprint, and that's going to be a blueprint class actor, and this is going to be BP interface damager. And this is going to get all of the actors with that interface and apply a take damage command to them. So again, in the event graph, on begin play, quick delay, just to let everything load and be on the screen before we see anything happening. I'm going to do get all actors with interface, and it was called deal damage. Now, we're getting different references, we're getting different actor types, but because they're using an interface, that doesn't matter. So if this was just a direct reference, we'd have to cast and see, well, are you the box and are you the light? It's going to be a lot of work. Much easier here to get the interface and then for each, and just apply that deal damage command. Deal damage message. There we are. And if I set the damage amount to be, let's say 50, that's greater than 10, it's going to give me that. And you can see the output here, the kill target boolean. So it's going to return that value to this blueprint depending on whether it's been killed or not. So I'm just going to do a quick branch. If it's been killed, what I want to do, I'm just going to print, and I'm going to print the name, get object name, print the name of the thing we killed. So in this case, we're going to kill the light because we've dealt enough damage to it. We're not going to kill the cube because we never set up the way to pass that data back, and we'll print the thing off. So now, hopefully, if I quit the game, 1 second, the cube will shrink, the light will go off, and we'll get a print string saying the light has been killed, and we get exactly that. So because they both implemented the same interface, we're able to sort of get them all en masse and deal damage to them, and which in this case destroys the light and shrinks the cube. So where this is useful, again, weapon systems, if you're firing guns, sometimes let's say you have a flamethrower or something like that that can affect the world, you might have a cube, a wooden object gets set on fire, an ice object gets melted, that kind of thing, and they can all be done through a sort of a damage interface. Speaking of that, there is in the Epic Launcher, this thing here, content examples, and if I just open up that content examples, some really good examples of all of the things we've done today and last week. So if you want to have a look at the Epic examples of these things, the blueprint communication, they're a bit visually more exciting, but all the same logic is in there. We go to maps, Where am I? What's going on? Content. Let's do maps. Blueprint communication. And we can see some nice interactive examples of ways of doing this. So direct communication, turning lights on and off via get all, or here via get all, via casting, and etc. So if you want, some more examples of how these things can be set up and what they can do, there's some really good content here. You can see very similar spawning, destruction, and now I can spawn another one. So using those event dispatchers, and then find the interfaces, different lights being triggered on. So, all right. Let me just. So, apologies for that. As always, if you have any questions, comments, anything about what we've done today, please do let me know. Big thanks to all my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel and letting me do this. And hopefully that has been interesting and you've learned some things. And I'll see you all